Thank you all for your testimony and your. Mr. Cooper.
I actually do have questions. Sorry, I had a committee meeting and a testify and also a meeting with the speaker. So let me get my notes here. So I know earlier, I know I missed a big part of your presentation. Currently with the Gaming Commission right now, just on tribal gaming, you got a backlog of between 23 and 2,400 cases. And when you guys spoke last time?
That was me that spoke on that issue last time. And it's actually 2,400 background investigations for the applicants on the card room side, not tribal.
Right, on the card room side, but still, that's still a tremendous backlog. And actually take on, if the iPoker went through, to take on that, you don't have the resources right now to deal with it. And in my estimation, in working with DOJ for a number of years, it's a long way to ramp up to get that, to be able to handle that issues. And internet poker has a very far and wide reach. And excuse me if I missed it, how would you plan on dealing with that?
Well, currently right now, we already have a budget change proposal going through the legislature and hopefully will be approved for the 12 positions to handle specifically that backlog just mentioned. We are also submitting subsequent requests for permanent positions to handle our ongoing workload right now. But for the internet poker, because it would be a new industry, separate funding as well, we would need the additional resources specific for that industry to handle that workload.
But traditionally, you guys have been understaffed for the tribal gaming and the card rooms.
We are understaffed for the card room side.
And over the years, you guys have asked for positions and never gotten them. So I'm a skeptic on that you guys will get more positions with this for iPoker. It's just, you guys can't say it, I can, but you guys have always kind of been treated as a stepchild in no uncertain terms. So I just have my concerns. Will you be fully staffed and funded at an appropriate level? And it hasn't happened in the past, and I'm not sure it will happen in the future.
Well, I do think one of the benefits of these hearings has brought to light the issue within the Bureau of Gambling Control and the understaffing that we currently do have for the license types. So I do believe that there is more understanding of the needs that we have within the Bureau of Gambling Control.
Right. And right now, most of your locations are brick and mortar locations you're dealing with. And obviously with this, it's going to open up to a whole new realm, not just for the locations, but to me, it's going to be a tough road to haul dealing with some of the issues that the internet brings. And I know DOJ's got a tough time right now with their gaming with their labs, with their forensics. So, in trained investigators right now. And how would you plan on addressing that issue?
Earlier testimony stated that we obviously do not have a gaming lab right now. We don't have jurisdiction over electronic devices currently. So that is definitely the resources that we would need to build up in order to regulate internet poker.
Okay, I apologize. I was gone trying to look through my notes here that I wrote down earlier.
And Mr. Cooper, if you want to take up some of those funding discussions, we happen to have the budget sub-chair over here to my left.
Right. Well, I'm just saying, long before he came here, it's always been that way. You guys have not had enough officers. I know the AG, that's not my realm, but it's traditionally been that way. And we're talking going back many, many years. So, and right now, law enforcement is not a priority in some cases. So, those are legitimate concerns with that. And obviously there's a ramp-up period training for these agents, sufficient training, and then who knows where these investigations will take them. So there are a great deal of cost involved, and I'm not sure if the legislature has a stomach or the appetite to deal with this because they haven't in the past. So
I'm sure, being formerly with the high-tech task force, you know about the costs associated with training individuals to conduct technology-based criminal investigations, and there is a substantial amount of cost involved. We have already initiated some training for some of our agents based upon the limited amount of technology-based investigations we're engaged in. However, you are absolutely correct. There will be a significant amount of resources necessary to include training and qualified individuals to conduct not only the criminal investigations, but a large component will be the audits associated with these companies that are going to be coming on board, as well as the individuals.
Right. And you guys have a great group of investigators, but it's tough sometimes when the locals get better training and better equipment than the state has. And that's sad, because the state is tasked with doing so much more on a much larger scale, and yet you've got one hand tied behind your back. So you've started out at a disadvantage. And that's the real truth. And I'll tell my members this, committee members, it has been that way and continues to be that way. And to fund this adequately, and I'm a supporter of tribal sovereignty and IPOCR if it can get worked out, but there's a lot of work to do, and it's going to be significant cost in it.
So, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jones Sawyer.
And so I'll make a commitment, and obviously you weren't here earlier when I asked the Department of Justice to give us that price tag so that we can adequately fund them. Obviously, we need to add on top of that any of the backlog, and if you just get that number to me, I know we have 2 votes. We'll keep working on the other 118, but I think we can get there. Because you have a very active and strong advocate, and I'm a strong advocate for you also. And so it may not have happened in the past, just like we didn't fund the courts in the past. And they've gotten $100 million in my first budget when I was budget chair, and $200 million the next year. So it can happen, and it can happen in a substantive way, especially if we want this to go forward with IPOCR. So you have my commitment as budget chair to make sure we make a yeoman's effort to get you all the resources that you need, especially now that I know from the gentleman from Sacramento that you do an excellent job at what you do.
And we greatly appreciate that support, and we are willing to work with your office at any point in time and provide those figures.
Let's do it sooner
It's not
than
right
later.
here.
And also, would you guys regulate it, or would it be a new entity that would regulate it? What are your thoughts on that?
We would integrate it into our current structure. However, there would be new resources that we would need to bring in. And resources, I mean, expertise level that would need to be brought into our existing staffing.
Right. Now, this year, how much did you get in your budget? How much additional money? Well, number one, what'd you ask for first? And number two, what'd you get?
I think that was you.
What made it before the legislature was a request for 12 limited-term positions. And
So hold on. What made it? What'd you ask for initially? 'Cause obviously, it's vetted through the process.
you are going to get me in trouble.
I get that. Yeah. So what'd you ask for?
We asked for 17 permanent staff and 12 limited term, but that request did not make it to the legislative analyst's office.
And that's how it always is with state government. So someone had you ask for 12 somewhere along the food chain, correct? It got whittled down to 12. Now, this is me asking, so don't worry about it.
Are you going to come back to the office with me? You are correct.
Yeah, and that's my whole thing. It's like banging your head against the wall. If we're going to do it, we want to do it right. And this involves a great deal of detail, and yet traditionally they have not been funded correctly. And Mr. Jones Sawyer, you're a great chair for Budget Sub 5, but to adequately fund these folks will be a significant amount of money. And obviously, when it comes to approps, funds get slashed. So this is how it works. And these people are great; they do a great job. But like I said, how can you win a fight with one hand tied behind your back? And I'll sit here and say it: the money is not there to fully fund it and fund it efficiently. And that's the big concern with that coming from law enforcement. You guys can't say that. Obviously, you got your bosses. I can say it, and it's the truth, and we know it's the truth out there. So that's an issue that's got to be addressed one way or the other. It doesn't work that way, and it's a moving target that you can never hit. And this is so involved and so intricate in this business, as we know and as we've heard. So, if I support this, it's got to be done right, and it's going to take a significant amount of money to really do it properly.
Yeah, I have to agree with Mr. Cooper and his comments in so much, and frankly, it's refreshing that we're focusing here in this committee with today's informational hearing less on potential licensees and more on protecting the public law enforcement, making sure that you all have the tools to do your job. And I know I'm going to work closely with Mr. Cooper, Mr. Jones Sawyer, and others to ensure that if, in fact, the legislature decides to move forward with an IPOCR legislation, that the focus is that on giving the necessary law enforcement tools so that we're doing our jobs for our constituents.
And just one last question, Mr. Chair. If you could give me an estimate to actually fund this property, if IPOCR did come to fruition, in your mind, what is your best guess estimate, and don't lowball me, on what it would take to do an adequate job?
As I stated earlier, we are not prepared to give you that number today. There are many questions that still need to be answered to go into our fiscal analysis.
But just to come up to deal with the caseloads you have right now, you're talking 17 bodies and,
Yes.
and how many millions of dollars?
I believe the
Equipment?
request came to approximately $3 million for the
30?
three.
Three?
For the 17 positions
Right.
requested, yes.
And that got cut down to 12.
12 limited term.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you all for your participation today. I appreciate all of your work on behalf of California. Okay, at this time, we're going to move to our next panel, suitability standards for licensure. If everyone would approach. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your willingness to participate in today's hearing. I think we're going to begin with Chairman Gruby. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you. To Mr. Chairman and members, I'm Jeff Gruby, the chairman of the Agua Caliente Band of Kui Indians. I have been chairman since 2012 and have served on the tribal council as a member and vice chairman since 2006. And as you're aware, I've been a part of this issue since the beginning. And I think my tribe has been very consistent on our values and the points that we've made, and very consistent. And I'm going to share that again. Unfortunately, a lot of this hearing is a lot of testimony that's been heard several times. But I applaud your effort, Chairman, to doing this again, going through the process. I think that last panel had some good discussion, especially comments from Mr. Cooper and Jones Sawyer and yourself. So our tribal council has supported establishing a regulatory framework for IPOCR in California for several years, and we have worked leader to leader with many of the tribes here today in this room to develop that framework. We and several other major tribes have concluded an accord is possibly within reach on many issues, including entry fees, the percentage for the state, and appropriate roles for regulators from the Department of Justice and the Gambling Control Commission. Notwithstanding the backlog of 2,000 background checks already overwhelming the Gambling Control Commission before IPOCR adds on, there remains one overarching major and contentious issue with the divide about as large as the Coachella Valley that has thus far been insurmountable, and that is who should be eligible to participate. This issue has always been the one issue we have not been able to overcome. Other tribal leaders here to share their concerns about a major expansion of gaming to the racetracks, and I share that concern. But I'm here to discuss whether California should authorize internet poker licenses to foreign interests and others that violated U.S. laws by taking bets illegally in the state and nation from 2006 through 2011. When Congress passed the Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act in 2006, many in the industry ceased their activity in this country. However, some flaunted the law and continued their companies and their brands by unlawfully accepting bets from U.S. players from December 31st, 2006, the effective date of UGA. criminal indictments were handed down against certain owners and senior officers. Indeed, 3 of the major offshore online poker operators had their websites seized and shut down by the U.S. Department of Justice, alleging those operators violated the UGIA and conspired to commit money laundering and bank and wire fraud by continuing to accept bets from the U.S. players after UGIA became effective. In the end, these violating companies negotiated a settlement with the U.S. government for $731 million, rather than risk the looming possibility of criminal convictions, which certainly would have prevented those firms and associate persons from obtaining gaming license in U.S. jurisdictions. Fast forward to last year, the PokerStars and Full Tilt Poker were purchased by Amaya, a Canadian company, for $4.9 billion. Those 2 companies, now owned by Amaya, built these tainted assets, control over 60% of the world's internet poker. And in December 2014, Amaya acknowledged it was the subject of a such launched Canadian securities investigation around questionable trading activity. The investigation has recently been reported as the largest insider trading investigation in Canadian history. And I think it was also discussed or mentioned earlier that Amaya PokerStars were gaming or allowed to game legally in the States, and that is not true. They cannot offer money sites. No state has authorized them to game legally as of yet. And I don't think California should be the first in that, I think, for obvious reasons. It is instructive that the state of Nevada, which is widely recognized as a leader in the regulation of gambling, including a bad actor clause in its internet poker statutes. Specifically, Nevada created 2 classifications, covered assets and covered persons. And with covered assets, meaning any tangible or intangible asset specifically designed for use in and used in connection with the operation of an interactive gaming facility that after December 31st, 2006, operated interactive gaming involving patrons located in the United States. We believe that the citizens of California deserve to have at least the same level of protection and that it must be expressly written into language of any iPoker bill. I think everyone can agree that no entity or person that chooses to flaunt federal laws for years should be authorized to use the fruits of their illegal behavior to obtain a license in California under any circumstances. Even neighboring tribes, the Morongo Band of Mission Indians and San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, with whom we share so many values, formally, publicly, and steadfastly held that view until they changed their position based on their business relationships. Our tribal council has steadfastly and consistently argued for bad actor provisions for years. We must maintain this position, not because we simply want to kill a bill, but because we truly believe that Californians deserve the best statutory protections, and California Indian tribes should not be used as the vehicle to allow bad actors to bring internet gaming in the form of iPoker to California. We believe the end game for PokerStars or any internet gaming company is not iPoker. A purely iPoker business model, in our opinion, is not sustainable in the long run. Internet gaming companies are using tribes to enter the California market initially with an iPoker business model, and if they are allowed in, they will continuously push for full-scale internet gaming. That is the outcome that we cannot support, that our tribal council does not support, and do not want to be responsible for. But if an iPoker bill is going to be considered, at the very least, the bad actor language must be included to prevent companies that have chosen to disregard the law from entering California. A strong statutory restriction like the one I previously mentioned that is in effect in Nevada must be included in any bill. It is not a workable task, overburdened and underfunded state gaming regulators with making these crucial decisions. It must be clearly spelled out in the bill. Absent the inclusion of a bad actor provision, I am certain that the overwhelming majority of tribal country will strongly oppose the passage of an internet poker bill. Thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate your presentation. And at this time, we'll move to Chairman Kinter.
Destroy your equipment. I apologize. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Leland Kinter. I'm the chairman of the Yochadihi Wintu Nation. a federally recognized Indian tribe located in northern Yolo County. We're about 45 miles northwest of Sacramento. I want to thank you all for allowing Yochadihi to participate in this discussion today. Our tribe owns and operates Cache Creek Casino Resort, which employs some 2,300 people, making it the largest private employer in Yolo County. In addition to my role as tribal chairman, I serve as the chairman of the Cache Creek's board of directors, which oversees a gaming facility that began as a small bingo hall in 1985, and since 2000 has operated as a Class 3 casino, under the terms of a compact between our tribe and the state of California. For 14 years, before my elevation to these positions of tribal and casino board chairman, I served as chairman of the Yochadihi Tribal Gaming Agency, also known as a TGA. The TGA is the entity charged with day-to-day on-site regulation of gaming at Cache Creek. So I am intimately familiar with the risks, rigors, and technical requirements associated with effective gaming regulation, which is essential to protecting patrons and the integrity of any gaming operation. I am here to address Yochadihi's concerns with the pending legislation that would authorize internet poker in the state of California. It has been asserted that Yochadihi is opposed to any form of legislation that authorizing internet poker and that no bill will satisfy our tribe. This is false. What is true is that Yochadihi's position is driven not by profit motive or a particular business model or even the desire to align with a certain business partner. Rather, Yochadihi's position is driven by principles that respect the heightened gaming rights with which the people of California have entrusted tribal governments and that comport with a sound public policy that is protective, thoughtful, and deliberate. Driven by these principles, for the past 3 years, we have worked closely with a broad coalition of other tribal governments in consultation with legislatures and card clubs to develop and shape legislation that would allow internet poker to move forward in California, but in a way that makes sense. What makes sense is legislation that would protect the integrity of gaming in California by restricting licenses in meaningful and protective ways, and by ensuring the needed resources and regulations are in place before any internet poker site goes live. These core principles, based on suitability and regulatory protections designed to protect Californians and the integrity of gaming, are the basic principles on which any sound internet poker legislation should rest. With these principles in mind, our concerns are essentially three. 1, allowing bad actors to participate. 2, expanding licenses to entities that do not presently offer poker. And 3, authorizing internet poker without ensuring the needed resources and regulatory framework are in place for the protection of Californians. Turning to the first issue, it is difficult to understand why there is such debate over what should be obvious. Those companies that have engaged in any form of unlawful or unauthorized internet gaming should be disqualified from licensure. These bad actors should not be rewarded with the opportunity to offer internet poker websites to and profit from Californians. The same is true for companies that purchase their tainted assets on the hope of profiting from ill-gotten gains. This should hardly be controversial. Allowing bad actors to participate would reward them for illegal conduct and undermine the integrity of state-sanctioned gaming. Such companies and the companies that purchase them would be able to profit from tainted assets by using customer lists and patron databases developed only by breaking the law. Not only is this just wrong, it places those who have followed the rules at an unfair competitive advantage. It bears noting that the state of Nevada, a state widely seen as a leader in the regulation of gaming, passed an internet poker statute containing a bad actor prohibition. And yet, there continues to be significant debate in this body as to whether bad actors, companies like PokerStars or Amaya, the company that bought PokerStars, should be allowed to offer poker to Californians on the internet. Amaya's purchase hardly cleansed PokerStars of its bad prior acts, particularly since Amaya seeks to use the fruits of its illegal activities for its own profit. And as we've seen recently in the news, Amaya is itself the subject of widespread investigation involving allegations of insider trading and other bad acts. Fundamentally, bad actors should be barred from participating, and entities that acquire them should likewise be barred from profiting from these tainted assets. Turning to the second issue of concern, the expansion of poker licenses to new entities to allow the horse racing industry to participate. When this legislative initiative began several years ago, it was Yochadihi's position that only tribal governments could be entrusted to operate poker on the internet. since tribes are the only entities that have the exclusive right to offer poker electronically today thanks to Proposition 1A and the tribal state compacts. Our position has evolved in the face of widespread support for card rooms to offer poker on the internet, but this is where licensure should end. Only those entities with demonstrated expertise and experience in offering poker to Californians should be allowed to participate. Importantly, this is consistent with the will of California voters who, with a limited appetite for more gaming, have resoundingly rejected the idea of authorizing new forms of gaming at horse racing facilities. Last, but hardly least, the present ability of the state to effectively regulate is among our chief concerns as the legislature considers a major expansion of gaming in California. It is among our chief concerns because the state of affairs in California today. The state simply cannot enforce the laws on the books now to stop illegal gaming activity rampant in California card rooms. In large measure, the state regulators cite lack of resources as the main reason. It is therefore imperative that before the legislature authorizes this new form of gaming, the play of poker in this new, far more complicated medium we know as the internet, it must ensure that enough resources are devoted and the regulatory framework and appropriately staffed regulatory structures are in place. Tribes have played by the rules when it comes to gaming regulation, but the same cannot be said for other sectors of gaming in California. Here I'm referring to the card rooms, which continue to violate multiple laws without the state taking corrective action, and despite efforts by tribes to secure enforcement of those laws. There are several prominent examples of these violations. We know most card rooms are playing blackjack and baccarat. The play of both games in card rooms is prohibited by California Constitution, as they are games of the type played in Nevada and New Jersey casinos. Moreover, the California Penal Code expressly bars 21, in other words, blackjack, as a prohibited game. Yet, you can drive down streets and highways in our state and see billboards on which card rooms boldly advertise that they play Las Vegas-style blackjack. Despite these ads, card rooms argue their game is different than blackjack. However, card room dealers publicly acknowledge the play is exactly the same as blackjack, the game that tribal governments alone may legally offer. In addition, the card rooms are effectively playing house bank games. The card rooms no longer rotate the bank during the play of their games and allow so-called third-party proposition player, essentially a partner of the card rooms, to maintain that bank. This practice directly violates the California Constitution and Penal Code and the tribal exclusivity granted to tribes by California voters. These are just a few examples of illegal activities that the state has yet to stop, and there are more. I want to point out that we, as casino operators and gaming regulators, have the utmost respect for the employees of the Bureau and the Gambling Control Commission. It's not about those individuals, it's about the system in which they work. They simply lack the resources necessary to effectively regulate. The Bureau official in charge of licensing has reported the Bureau has a backlog of some 2,400 gaming license applications. At hearings on the topic, Bureau representatives have testified they are unable to take on additional duties because they cannot handle those they currently have. It is against this troubling backdrop we must ask ourselves, if the state agencies cannot presently effectively regulate the brick-and-mortar card room industry, are they presently in a position to regulate the vastly more complex environment of Internet poker? Internet poker will require an entirely new way of thinking about regulation. After all, brick-and-mortar gaming facilities do not require anyone to verify their location and age of individuals who are not physically present, or to consider the possibility of people hacking into computer systems through their Internet access. Regulations have to be in place to protect against breaches of data loss and confidentiality, money laundering, organized crime, gambling by minors, and all risks associated with hackers and computer security failures. These regulatory hurdles can be overcome, but only if the legislature ensures that any Internet poker bill requires the development of internal controls and protections and the use of technologies designed to mitigate online risks. The legislature must build in these protections before website operators turn on the switch. Using tribal regulation as a model, the state might consider a structure that requires licensed operators to separately establish dedicated gaming regulatory agencies, subject to checks and balances, which enforce those controls on a day-to-day basis with regular reporting to and audits by the state. But however it is structured, the legislature must, at a minimum, provide state regulators the resources and expertise needed to effectively regulate poker on the Internet. This medium is far more vulnerable to pernicious activity than land-based facilities. At our facility, we work tirelessly 24 hours a day to protect it from illicit activity. We do that to protect our patrons and our business. We follow the rules to uphold our end of the compact that we have with the state of California. In that same vein, we urge this body, when considering whether and how to authorize a major expansion of gaming in California, to take steps to ensure that protective regulatory controls are first in place, and that those who will be charged with protecting Californians are armed with enough resources and expertise to do so. Thank you for your time, committee.